With one of the best savings rates in America, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. Even easier than choosing Slash to be in your band.
Next up for lead guitar. You're in.
Cool.
Yep, even easier than that. And with no fees or minimums on checking and savings accounts, is it even a decision? That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One N.A. member FDIC.
I'm Emily Elizabeth, and I'm the host of the What Fulfills You podcast, a show for and about individuals always seeking to be their best selves. On this show, we talk all about building the mindset, finding the right careers, creating meaningful relationships, and so much more. Welcome to the What Fulfills You podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the What Fulfills You podcast, or welcome back if you have been tuning in for a while. Today, I am pulling an episode from the vault, and I am bringing back an episode I did with one of my very close friends, Elia, where he discussed his perspective on male psychology in dating, primarily in today's culture, and I guess probably as well as speaking in a certain age demographic. He is also my age, so we're 25. And the reason why I wanted to bring this episode back for this week's guest episode is because I really find that Elia has a expanded perspective on human dynamics. And mind you, no one is perfect and no one ever has things exactly to a T, but he is that friend that I often go to for, number one, a male perspective, but also number two, someone that I can really rely on to understand my actual temperament. He a while ago, he would say, Emily, you tend to poke the bear a lot, so try not to poke the bear too much, type of thing. And I was laughing because it is so true. And to hear that reminder from a close friend who's willing to acknowledge some of these traits in you is a really great wake-up call and a great reminder. So I always have really helpful conversations with him. Obviously, this episode was recorded last year, so this was actually about 1 month before I left for New York. So I was living in LA at the time, and so was he. And so the context in some of this episode is definitely no longer applicable in terms of maybe my dating situation at the time or his dating situation. But nonetheless, I think the general nuggets of advice is, of course, still really applicable. And this was actually a highly downloaded episode last year. So if you haven't tuned in to that one, then here's your opportunity. And I do want to add as a fun context as well, for those of you who haven't heard me talk about Elia before or haven't heard last year's episode with him, I actually met him at the mall exactly 2 years ago around Halloween. So this actually was on Halloween. And I met him while I was sitting down eating gelato with my friend Alexis. And I just remember having this instinct feeling that him and his friend were going to come up to us. And, it was in a very friendly way. There was actually no, flirtatiousness, but it was really cool because we actually talked about personal development right off the bat, and it just flowed naturally. And then we saw that we had one mutual friend who's also a fellow entrepreneur. So it just clicked right away. And I remember we ended up grabbing coffee or tea at some point a few weeks later, and we just became really close friends. And that just goes to show you the power of how you can meet anyone and everyone in random situations. And Elia and I talk about this all the time, how there's probably a lot of missed opportunities that we encounter on a daily basis, and we just don't know because we didn't go for it. And so for me, that's why I am very, I guess you could say, fearless in approaching people, whether it's a potential girlfriend or guy friend or even potential romantic partner, whatever that case may be, I try not to hesitate, because the worst case scenario is that it doesn't hit it off and you move on with your merry life. And look, we all have our own things that we worry about, so no one's going to ever remember enough to care, you know? But on the flip side, it could also turn into a really cool friendship like Elia and I, or maybe you never know, like you actually end up dating someone that you met in just like a random, you know, whether it's a coffee shop, mall, or you're passing through at the same restaurant, whatever that is. Just don't hesitate, you guys. I think that's just the beauty of life, that had Elia and his friend not come up to us to just chat and give it a try, just be friendly, we wouldn't be having this conversation, and I wouldn't have such an amazing friend in my life. So for that, I am so grateful. And with that being said, let's just dive into the episode. So Elia, thank you for joining me on the show.
Thank you for having me.
This is my first thought. I want to start here before we go anywhere. We have to start with how we met. This is the origin story. So, this is actually something I never asked you. I don't think so. But first off, for context, and I'll probably have already included this in the intro, but to repeat, we met at the fucking mall.
Yes.
Out of the blue. It was on Halloween. I'm pretty sure I was very much dressed down that day. I think I was wearing like sweats, no makeup, was eating gelato, and was catching up with my old roommate.
I think you had white sandals. Is that possible?
White sandals. Probably maybe loafers, but I don't think sandals.
Oh yeah, might have been loafers.
Oh wow, that's good memory.
Yeah.
Actually, I do remember you wearing Yeezys.
Yeah. I remember you mentioning that.
Yeah, I've mentioned that before. Okay, but the question is, why did you guys come up to us again?
So I was with my friend Daniel. Mm-hmm. We do this thing that we meet every single week.
Okay.
And
you still meet every week?
Pretty much, yeah.
Oh wow.
Not
okay.
just with him, but like with other people as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we were going around. I think there was Westfield Center.
Mm-hmm. No, Century City Mall.
Yeah,
Is
Century
that the same?
City Mall.
No, I don't know if it's the same. Century City Mall.
And I think Daniel had a crush on either you or your friend. I'm not sure.
Okay.
And he just told me out of the blur, let's go speak with them.
Okay.
I was like, okay, awesome. And I kind of like, a part of me didn't want to do that because I was like, I don't really know them. Like,
yeah. Is that out of your comfort zone usually, to go up to random girls and?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, got it.
I feel like it's out of everybody's comfort zone.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. But then we became friends.
Yeah.
I remember I was well, here's the thing. At this point, you know, I'm very observant with people's nonverbal body language, right? And the way you guys walked by us, I could just tell you guys were going to come up before you guys were coming up. I had already thought that. I'm like, all right, wait for these Yeezys to come back. And then next thing you know, because I saw you guys pass twice, and I'm like, all right, they're going to turn around at some point. So you guys turn around and you come up and talk to us. And I remember being like, yeah, whatever. So I'm eating my gelato.
Yeah.
And I think you asked me, like, what do I do, I think, right? And then I said, you know, what I do, and I think I mentioned the podcast. And obviously at the time I didn't know much about you, but clearly you have interest in this field, in the people in the industry. We obviously like Tim, Naval, all that. So that was intriguing. But the way you like kept pushing, like, what is your podcast about? And I'm like, yeah, you know, it's about life fulfillment, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, but what else? I'm like, well, Jesus, dude. I mean, I'm eating my gelato right now. What more do you want me to say? So that was interesting to me, was just the way that played out. And then we became good friends, right? Just random interactions.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the podcast was the fact that I was actually interested in it, you know. And therefore, first of all, I don't know even right now a lot of people that have a podcast and that are actually active within that.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned what fulfills you, it really surprised me in the sense of, this is like a young girl.
Yeah.
And she's eating her gelato. And, you know, like you wouldn't, I feel like fulfillment is something that is so specific, specifically with people in general, but specifically with young people. So when it comes to meeting you And you telling me that felt really unusual. And I wanted to dig into that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, to dive into, I don't know if I think you probably can put the pieces together, but in terms of why I have been always curious about life fulfillment or went into that route was because of the adversity I have experienced. And I think we talked about this, interestingly enough, last week, because you had asked me during our walk, you're like, what makes something along the lines of what makes you different from, you know, some of your girlfriends or some of my peers who are female that are around my age, right? And I had mentioned to you that when I went through adversity, I literally had no one to lean on. And so it made me dig deeper, and it made me question a lot of things in life, like, what does bring fulfillment? Like, if I'm not happy right now, what is it that I'm missing? And what is it that I can attain right now but still wouldn't make me happy, right? So that's kind of where I realized, like, you know, money and success, and many people speak about it, but I think there's a level of adversity everyone needs to face head on in order to come to that internal realization as well, as to not just why money doesn't buy happiness, but actually, like, have you felt the concept of having money and then still being really fucking unhappy because you have zero strong relationships, for example, which for me, that has been the pillar of fulfillment in life. I don't know what your thoughts are on.
That's the thing that surprised me about you. The fact that you actually took ownership for your life circumstances, and you were not thinking, oh my God, you know, it's society, or it's the freaking US president, or it's politics, or whatever other thing. And you were like, no, this thing that I'm going through right now, it's probably my fault. Or even if it's not, it doesn't really matter. Like, it's still on you to get yourself out of it.
Yeah.
And therefore, hearing to you telling me about your decision to take things head on really made me notice how all the people that I see that are somewhat like on a different level at some point within their lives at a specific time when they decided to take that specific decision.
And I think we have similar mentors and similar people that we look up to. So I think that's why we align. I think it was funny. I think the first time we hung out after was at Barnes & Noble, actually on election night, right?
Yes.
Everything was locked down. This was at the Grove. And we went to the bookstore. And I remember we were looking at books, and I remember talking about Naval, and you were like, oh, I really like him. And then we talked about Tim Ferriss. So clearly we get our mentality and our philosophy from similar people or the same people, and we basically interpret it in similar ways into our life. But aside from that, we'll dive into deeper shit later. But first things on my mind that I definitely want you to share is the relationship and dating psychology topic. Obviously, you're not a psychologist, but I think your approach is very grounded, but also very interesting to me. Like, for example, with the whole like sex on the first date, I wasn't completely surprised by your answer, but I was surprised by how like instinctive you had that out.
Yeah.
And the way you're like, oh, that doesn't throw me off and such. But I guess we can start there. Like, because this is a area of life that I think a lot of women, especially in their 20s, struggle with right now. And I think there's not enough of them that get advice from men. And there's a huge difference between men and boys. And I think especially in American culture, you know, you're from Italy, so it's definitely different, and you've had more experience jumping from there, coming to America, living here on your own. So you just, again, have similar experiences to me in a sense where it's like I came from Pennsylvania to California, have been establishing my life out here by myself. So it's just, you grow up quicker, right? And you learn to be an adult because you kind of have no choice, emotionally and financially and so forth. So let's dive into that touchy topic where everyone goes, does it matter if you have sex on the first date?
Right. I think at the end, all right, so let me premise this by saying that this is purely personal.
Yeah.
And obviously it's going to change person by person.
Mm-hmm.
But for most guys that I've spoken to and that I know and that I'm friends with,
Mm-hmm.
and for myself, the answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely no. If anything, that's a good thing.
Right.
Which is something that we mentioned on our walk, and that is I personally believe that it is not possible for me to truly know somebody that I potentially may have a romantic relationship with
Mm-hmm.
without having had some sort of sexual intercourse with.
Right.
And the reason for that is, whilst this may be taken out of context,
Mm-hmm.
the reason for that is there is something special that happens whenever two people decide to do something as, primal as getting naked.
Right.
And it is in some sort of way, I believe it to be some sort of agreement of I'm letting go of my need to be safe,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to be closer to you in the most possible way. And therefore that type of connection that gets established after two people have some sort of sexual intercourse,
Mm-hmm.
in this case actually have sex,
Yeah.
is something that is really important. It's really important specifically for relationships,
Mm-hmm.
and for just truly getting to know somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously it's not the only thing.
Right.
There is a lot of other things involved with it,
Right.
but it is an important step indeed.
Right. And it's funny too, because I want to add, obviously the audience doesn't know you like I know you, but I say earlier that I was somewhat surprised by that, because you are more of a gentleman kind of guy that, outside of our jokes, like
Yeah.
I would say, you're a great guy. You're very like respectful of people and stuff. So I think it says a lot for someone like you, of your character and of your nature, to say that you wouldn't think less of a girl if she sleeps with you on the first time. If anything, that's actually what you want, to be able to test out the capability of how, whether it's relationship worthy or not.
Yeah. It's not like, obviously the act of sex itself is something that both people need to want,
Right.
obviously. And for me, even the possibility of somebody thinking I want to get into a relationship with somebody without having had sex with them sounds insane.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the reasons that I mentioned, like it's such a primal thing, the connection that there has to be chemistry when it comes to something as primal as that.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore you get into a state in which words really don't matter as much, and you can say a lot of things by doing specific actions, maybe in a slow way or within the way that you carry eye contact.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore just getting into a relationship without having sex just sounds really dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have an opinion on, so someone might argue, oh, well, shouldn't you still wait for like a second or third date? Or like there are girls out there who still live in this fear of, oh, if I give him sex on the first date, then he's already gotten the prize per se, right? So most people have this fake rule of thumb, like, oh, I should wait 3 dates, or I may, right? These little nuggets. And what are your thoughts on that from a guy's perspective? Why does it not change? Like, can you elaborate on why it doesn't change from first date to third date in terms of their perceived value? Because again, this is a fear. I've had this before too. I've definitely loosened up on it, or have overcome it in this past year, in realizing the psychology behind in today's modern dating. But can you maybe share your thoughts on why it wouldn't really change from whether they made you wait on whether they gave it to you on a first date or they made you wait till a third date?
So let me premise this by saying it depends, because I've heard of stories in which my quote unquote point actually gets debunked, and it actually made sense for the relationship to grow and actually wait for the second date.
Right.
In most cases, my hypothesis is that as long as both people want it, better not to wait.
Okay.
Because of the fact that that kind of commitment that two people make, and that sort of like place in which people get that is, I want to experience you, that is very healthy for starting off the relationship on a good note, as long as obviously both people are mature.
Yeah.
I think too often people, specifically when it comes to relationships, are backed by fear, and it seems to me, generally speaking, that fear seems to be not a good place to start off any kind of relationship, whether it's platonic, it's romantic, doesn't necessarily matter. Mainly because you're not going to be showing yourself for who you really are. And yeah, just showing anything less than who you really are romantically, specifically if you're interested into actually long-term dating, it's just dumb. Like, you are literally going to need to live like a good chunk of your life with that person, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, a year. I don't know however long it's going to last. But given that premise that there is that initial interest, why wouldn't you want to show yourself?
Right. Yeah. Now when you say it and looking back at my old way of thinking, I laugh because I used to, like, months or maybe even over a year ago, when I was like concerned, do I sleep with him on the first time? Because like, not because of this, like, I wanted to sleep with you. It's because sometimes like the chemistry or the tension is just there. And like you said, if both want it, it's like, why would you wait off on it? And I will admit, my reasoning used to only be so that my perceived value is not diminished and does not go away simply because it already happened the first time. And so for sure, I know many girls still struggle with that. And I think it's becoming more mainstream to recognize that just because you do sleep with the guy on the first time, it doesn't mean you are less valuable. But it definitely is a traditional way of thinking. I mean, of course, my mom would say like, he's going to think you're trash if you sleep with him on the first time, right? So hearing that is always very dissonance in my mind, because it's like, but I know modern day says otherwise, Okay, this is something we should dive into as well, and it's very funny. It's about the funeral thing.
Oh God.
It has to be talked about with you, especially again because you're very grounded, and the way you were like, what at me. So we're gonna dive into the personal experience I gave you last week, and this is actually our conversation last week was what inspired me to be like, you should be on the podcast, because just the way you gave me feedback, the way I discussed it with you, it was very like, that should have been recorded, and that should have been, something girls would have wanted to hear. But I shared with you an experience where I felt a sense of uncertainty because of, going from texting nearly every day with someone and then not doing so. And then, of course, recognizing in hindsight that I have a desire and need of being in control. So when that's not happening, or when I'm unaware of the reasoning, I feel out of control. And secondly, recognizing that it was very silly and small to feel so overwhelmed or uneasy. The word you used was uneasy, and that was a great way to describe it. I felt uneasy in a sense because I was like, is this like because of X, Y, and Z? And basically I was telling you as well that a part of me wanted to do what there's this girl who has gone viral on TikTok and Instagram. Her name is Tinx, Tinx, Her real name is Christina. Funny enough, she went to Stanford, and she's, you know, she's from London, went to Stanford. She's 30. And prior to her TikTok fame, she was like a normal person working in corporate and worked in, I think, on the buying side of for Gap, and worked in fashion and PR, all that, whatever, journalism. Anyways, she does these Q&As on Instagram, and someone would ask her what to do to get over a guy you never dated. And she goes, she's probably half sarcastic, but very much half serious. She goes, light a candle, buy some flowers for yourself, hold a funeral, and lay the fucker to rest.
Okay.
And I told you about this, and you're like, oh my goodness. So, I almost wanted to do that because I wanted to feel a sense of control. Like, okay, maybe it's just call it quits because we haven't, and I fucking hope he's not listening to this. I don't think he would. Really doubt it. But if he did, you know, by the time I publish this, we're at a different chapter. So, but anyways, I remember thinking to myself, yeah, I want to take control. I feel uneasy. I want to feel not uneasy. So I'm going to cut it off. And I remember, like, yeah, wanting to pull that trigger of holding a funeral, basically. And you definitely put me in my place in a sense where you told me, like, I had asked you, basically, what would you do in the guy's position? Like, where there's, you know, this distance right now because I'm not in that city yet. And, you know, you had basically alluded to the fact that you would take it easy. You would take baby steps, right? But then, you know, over the past week, I had mentioned to you earlier, I have calmed down my emotions. I recognize a lot of the things internally that I need to work on just outside the situation, but just in my life in general, because it can parlay over into many different aspects of my life. And in terms of the short-term instinct, right? Like wanting to take control right away. So I'm like wanting to do that. But my question for you is, what is your advice for women and girls, again, coming from a guy's perspective, when it comes to the early phase of dating, when it's texting, when it's talking? And again, you have been active on apps prior to your relationship. You met your girlfriend, you know, on Tinder, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that early phase, which now there's a meme, it's called situationships.
Okay.
People call it situationship, but basically where it's like you're kind of talking to each other, or you may be seeing other people as well, but there's like this one main person and it's very unknown and unclear where it's going. And which I think in more mature terms, it's called we're seeing each other.
I see. Yeah.
Right. I would call it we're seeing each other. Gen Z says situationship, you know, whatever, same thing.
This is essentially a bridge for me to start understanding more like, I guess, Gen Z or like even Gen X. I think that's the one that comes after, like, terms, I guess. Okay. Anyway, you were saying.
Yeah. So what's your advice for women to how to check themselves, basically, right? Instead of trying to host a funeral for the guy. I mean, we're obviously kidding here, but I mean, seriously, I think girls will be like wanting to take the upper hand all the time. Or even Alex Cooper from Call Her Daddy. I think I've heard her say something like, you know, turn on your read receipts so that the next time he texts you, it'll show that you read it, and then don't respond. And then when he asks you what's going on, text him hours back and be like, oh, sorry, I was busy. What's up? And like play this manipulative game, which, mind you, with human nature, there is a game. There is a game aspect to it. But I personally believe there is a mature way and there is this immature way. I don't know. That's just my thoughts. Or maybe you think there is no game at all, but I would like to hear what you would advise for girls.
Well, first of all, yes, there is a game, obviously. And it's a game of are we a fit when it comes to our social status. Yeah. So, like, do we match? Like, am I within the scale and within the, I guess you could say, like, you know, leadership, societal hierarchy, a fit to this person? And am I gonna be am I in a place that I'm happy with, and like, you know, are we in a similar place, and are we happy with each other? I tell most people, don't be boring. So don't play there is one thing is being manipulative, another thing is being boring. Those are kind of like the two opposite sides of the spectrum. One is negative, but the other side is negative as well. The main point is you gotta find that balance of being honest while also being fun.
Yeah.
Because obviously, if you're only honest, then you're like kind of boring.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay.
If you're only fun, it's missing that authenticity. Who are you? Who am I speaking with? So within like social skills, it's being taught how you should balance two things, and that is comfort and attraction. And that's essentially like another way to say the same thing. You should be fun while also being authentic. Now, how to balance your emotions so that you don't lay the fucker to rest, is that how you mentioned?
That's us American girls being bitches, let me tell you.
Beautiful.
American girls, they're kind of tricky.
I mean, I think that's...
Is that a worldwide thing?
Girl, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I don't know, but I feel like... do you think American girls say things in this more savage way, or do you think girls in Italy are saying the same shit?
Obviously, there are tendencies.
Okay.
So, like, specific types of girls.
Because American men,
tendencies.
I mean, have you seen frat guys, you know, guys in fraternities?
I've seen, yeah. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's fucking wild, but...
Sure it is. So,
yeah.
practice, start doing some meditative practices. Like, literally... I know it sounds boring. That's a boring answer. I'm sorry. But like, you know, meditate on it, reflect on it.
Yeah.
Take your time. Maybe speak about it with a friend that has your best interest in mind, that is calm.
Sounds like everything I do.
No, your
like,
approach is amazing.
That was legit what I did.
Yeah.
I talked to you about it. And then the next day I read Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. I'm a fucking nerd. But I will admit, like, I became very objective with it because I was like, Emily, you're so in the situation. You need to be out of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's really what it goes down to. You need a third party perspective. And if you're able to achieve it by yourself, by being meditative and being able to take your feelings out of that, amazing. Otherwise, ask a friend. But no, the path is absolutely... I always promote personal development. So, like, if you don't have a friend around of you, then figure it out yourself. If you don't have like something like weed around of you, it's never a long-term path for you to just look for things that are outside of you to fix your problems. So just focus on improving yourself to a place that you will be calm enough to actually think objectively of the situations.
On a similar topic, let's dive into the early stages when it comes to talking to multiple people. First off, do you do this, or is this your typical approach when you're talking to people? Like, let's say you go on a first date with a girl, you really liked it, she comes first to mind, right? But would you still keep your options open? Dive into that process. I think for me, that's something I probably struggle with, just because I'm very decisive about what I want. And so when I see qualities I like in a guy and see like compatibility or chemistry, I'm just not like a wasting time person. Like I don't have the mental capacity or physical time to just be texting multiple guys and trying to get them to take me to free dinners, you know, which is definitely a thing, you know, back. You laugh, but there are girls back in college who'd be like, oh, I hopped on Hinge so I can go and get free dinner tonight.
Well, yes, but that's what she's not saying is I hopped on Hinge because I was bored and I feel insecure about myself and I need validation.
Right.
That is the underlying message.
Yeah. Like
the objective is not the free dinner, just feeling loved.
True. True. I mean, so I guess what I'm saying is I'm just saying, like, you and I are both extremely busy in our own work lives and personal lives and such. So even for me, it would just be a lot mentally and emotionally to kind of dabble between, you know, two people even. But at the same time, I acknowledge that is today's dating culture. That is part of it, that people explore options until they reach a certain point. So, you know, considering that you recently got into a relationship, can you share that early phase of like the first, you know, month or two of how it spread out? Again, I think this helps give insight into people because just the beginning is so uncertain for many people. And I think, again, especially on the female side, it's hard to know how to approach it in a balanced way, in a calm way, and understanding what the guy is thinking on his end.
With one of the best savings rates in America, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. Even easier than choosing Slash to be in your band.
Next up for lead guitar. You're in.
Cool. Yep, even easier than that. And with no fees or minimums on checking and savings accounts, is it even a decision? That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One N.A. member FDIC.
The process of dating, specifically for me, was in a similar situation as yours. It was quite decisive.
Yeah.
Mainly because in the case of my current girlfriend and myself, we were both on the first date being like I really fucking like you.
Yeah.
And we were both pretty upfront when it comes to that. Like, I really fucking like you.
Yeah.
And that essentially led to, that honesty from the very beginning essentially led to us being able to actually see each other without playing games.
Okay.
Being like, okay, seeing each other every 3 days and, you know, being really, really upfront with our feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there is a balance to that, you know. One thing is falling in love with somebody. Another thing is letting your life fall apart because of it. So obviously keep your priorities in check, keep your life running, you know. Just because you found somebody that you really like, it doesn't mean that you gotta forget about everybody else's.
Right.
It seems to me that generally speaking, relationships that are likely to, or I guess like people that are seeing each other and that seeing each other may lead to people that actually go into a relationship. Generally speaking, end up seeing each other a lot more compared to the usual once a week. That is kind of like standard when it comes to people that you're seeing each other, but you're not really interested into pursuing further. So, for example, before my current girlfriend, I used to see this girl, again from Tinder again, and it was great, but I was not personally interested into pursuing her further into an actual relationship, and therefore we would see each other once a week, and for a while that was fine. Then it kind of ended up fizzling out because that's the way those things kind of like end up going. So that is just normal, you know, and as long as you're fine with it, that's perfectly fine.
I do want to ask, for that situation, did you know that pretty much by the first time you met her that you had no interest in pursuing it into a relationship?
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you feel like that is something, at least on your end, in your personal experience, you can tell just by the first time you meet someone?
In my case, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think for most people, that's the case.
I agree. I would say the same. So, in the other time, so how many times in total did you hang out with her? And was it like more casual then, or were you taking her to like dinner and something more formal? Well,
No.
first of all, I don't know what your typical way of taking a girl out is anyways, but like...
I mean, in my case, it was essentially like just hanging out at my place and, you know, frankly, having sex.
Or reading the Bible.
Reading the Bible, yeah.
Right.
That is the first priority.
Yeah.
And therefore, yeah, we essentially met for the first date, and then she just came to my place multiple times, like 5 or 6.
Okay, so if now I get it. So if for sure, if a guy is just casually inviting you over, take that as a not just hint, but just like that's the context of what it is.
Well,
right?
yeah, but at the same time, I did the same thing with my current girlfriend. I invited her over many times, and yet still she's.
Oh, that's interesting.
We actually ended up getting into a relationship together.
Right. See, that's interesting because I joke about this, but I also don't joke about it in the sense where, like, I hold a standard. Like, if a guy really wants to date me, then he will take me out for him. Like, if I even talk about this with guy friends. Again, this is just personal standard, but if a guy asks me to come over casually or like go hang out on the beach and drink wine or something, by the third date, that's gonna be a no. And yeah, I know that sounds pretty fucking harsh. I know. And the demographic of who I date as well. So on average, I'd be very surprised if someone in that age group is trying to take me like to something that simple on like a third date. Just being really honest. And I think that's kind of where my expectations are, because I've done a lot of the casual stuff, so I think if I wanted to just be casual with someone and do something like that, then that's fine. But I'm also at a point in my life where I would prefer something more meaningful, and so I can tell by the effort they put in. So I mean, I think I'm not saying yours is different, because I think, well, actually, how old is your girlfriend?
She's 21, turning 22 soon.
Okay, yeah, so she's younger. Yeah, so I mean, that age group is also, the way that dating works is different too. You know what I mean? You're not like going to
and
major...
myself as a demographic, as a guy.
Yeah,
like,
at the age of 24.
I'm probably unlikely to actually like bring a girl out at dinner.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that.
Right. Okay, so yeah, that's completely different. But yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, that's part of lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
We talked about this too in terms of, and I definitely want to dive into it with you, compatibility and chemistry. But for me, part of seeing if we're going to mesh well in that social hierarchy, if you will, something I didn't even think about, but part of it is seeing the types of places they would take me, because even someone I was seeing previously before the current one I'm talking to, great guy and same age as the one that I'm seeing right now, but something that caught me off guard was the type of restaurants we'd go to or type of places we went to. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds really shallow. And mind you,
was it like Chipotle or something?
No, it was like it was like nicer than like a Chipotle. I mean, it was like, but it was a very like casual
setting,
sit down place. Yeah. And it wasn't really thought out, and it almost seemed like too comfortable too quick. And it was over a span of 4 months, because obviously I'm not in the city, not in LA, as you and Ronnie know. But that was actually one of the things too. I ended up questioning myself because I was concerned that it was a shallow judgment. But I recognize that also it's part of the lifestyle I have, right? Like, call me bougie or whatever people want to say, but like, that is something I like to do. Like, I might not go to LA nightclubs. Like, I haven't been into an LA nightclub since college,
Okay.
I've gone to Miami, which is a different scene, but like going to a nightclub might not be the way I like to go out or like spend time with a partner, but I would love to go to like a dinner and drinks, for example, right? So to me, that's my way of testing, like, is that something they like to do independently of me as well? Because then I would see compatibility in lifestyle, and that probably has been the biggest, that's probably been the missing one that most people in the past has not had with me, which was compatibility in lifestyle, including my ex-boyfriend from years ago. Part of why I ended things is we did not have compatibility in what we wanted to do in our free time.
Right.
But do you have thoughts on that in terms of compatibility or like lifestyle, like what are the core traits you look for in terms of this person's going to be worth dating or pursuing? Both chemistry, so like emotionally, physically, like what are the top things you look for?
Well, the main thing is obviously I like her. Do I like her? The breakdown of how that works for me is there a specific standard physically that I enjoy about her? Do I like her physically? Obviously, the usual traits that go alongside a woman are the main ones. On top of that is, do I connect with her from an intellectual perspective? So that is, can we actually speak about things that matter? Are we going to be speaking about shopping?
Yeah.
That's a hard no.
Yeah.
Can we speak about stuff that is actually interesting? For me, that is, whatever, social skills, psychology, politics, business, economics,
I agree with that
these
one.
type of things.
Yeah.
That's really what it goes down to. Do you like her? Yes? No? And then everything else, I personally am okay with figuring out later, because, it's not like you can control everything.
Yeah.
Like right now, I'm going through a stage with my girlfriend when we are figuring out the way that we want to spend the weekends together. That is like time in which we are not working. On my side, I personally appreciate having an empty space where I'm just able to think, regroup, plan, organize notes, stuff like that, because I'm a nerd, I'm an entrepreneur. On her side, she would appreciate just spending quality time together. So that is, say, like going to a park, going on a hike, doing stuff like that. So we've been finding that balance. Obviously, it's not perfect. No relationship is really. But, I think a lot of it is just like taking off expectations. Taking off
Expectations.
all of that. That's, you're never gonna, you're not gonna know if you found the perfect person on your second or third date. That will require months and years.
Yeah, I agree with that one.
Just go on the ride, see what happens, and then course adjust if anything doesn't work. If anything doesn't work, actually call it out loud and see if you can find that balance. If you cannot find that balance, that may need that you need to find somebody else.
What about balancing the relationship with your work? I had asked you over audio message as well, and I know you're still working through it and figuring it out, but for example, even leading up to before making it official, were you guys texting every day? Were you keeping space in between? And again, especially, how do you separate your energy with work and your energy with your relationship without jeopardizing it, pretty much? Where it's like neglecting it. I mean, again, I think your situation is different because you really are working for yourself, and there's a lot of things that rely on you in order to, bring in income, right? So some people who are working in a corporate job might not have to, I guess, worry as much in that aspect. Again, I know the same worry as well. I mean, I work for myself now, so it's like no more ADP or selling payroll, right? No more pitching payroll to Ellie.
No more closing me.
I know. Yeah, so I mean, back then it's like, you can take off a little bit of weight in that area of life, so, but I'm really curious, how do you manage to balance it without making your partner feel neglected, or as if like, something's weird because you haven't texted in X amount of days, that kind of thing?
Well, first of all, is there awareness of your day-to-day priorities and stuff like that? In our case, she knows that I'm working most of the time. Yeah. Monday to Friday, I'm working. Saturday, I am busy for a specific amount of time. She knows that. So out of that, whatever we manage to fit is an extra. And it's really fine. Like, it's not like we need to speak every day. We cannot do anyway because we want, but it's never supposed to be something that you force. Right. If it's something that you force, it's a job. A relationship is not supposed to be a job.
Ooh, that's a good quote. I'm going to quote you on that.
I'm gonna trademark it. But that's really what it goes down to. Can you be a good person, be calm, overall be yourself? And if you're able to speak, amazing. If you're not able to speak, that's fine too. But the only reason why this works is because of the fact that from the very beginning, when it comes to our relationship, we had an agreement that was to, at the smallest frustration or the smallest kind of problem or hurdle, actually call it out and actually mention it to the other person.
Was this established before you officially started dating, or was this in the talking phase or the early dating phase?
I think that was right after we became official.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And how often were you seeing her before it became official, and then how often are you seeing her now? And I ask this too because I have an opinion on this, just from past experience, and then, kind of advising one of my close guy friends, when he was reflecting on his first relationship. They dated for 6 months, and he looks back now realizing it went really fast, and, certain things didn't get to balance out and all that. And out of all things, like, they just lacked similar views, values, etc. So that's more of the underlying thing, but just the way it went through, I think he was seeing her close to 4 to 5 times a week. And I had expressed to him, and again, I think this is something people do need to experience though firsthand to maybe recognize it. I don't know. But I realized after my first relationship with someone for 4 years, I remember initially, again, college is different, but I was seeing this person a lot, like 3, 4, 5 times a week. And now I would move forward in a new relationship where, beginning stage or not, I'd probably keep it to, at most 2 to 3 times a week, to be really honest, to pace it out, right? But I'm also curious if you have a different opinion, or if there is anything you have read in the past in terms of like how to gradually get there, right? Because you talk to me too, baby steps, right? Like, don't feel the urge to, always be connected with the person, because I look back too, it's like thinking from our conversation last week, there should be something new when you want to talk to them, right? Or else you become boring, right? And I'm like, well, shit, I don't want to look boring if it's like you're talking every day or talking nearly every day, and it's kind of the same thing because we can only text, right?
Yeah, I mean, boredom is directly correlated to lack of authenticity. So if you are speaking with somebody because you feel like you need to speak with them, you're probably going to be boring.
Okay.
So the answer is, don't speak with somebody as an obligation.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, but then diving into how frequent you were seeing your now girlfriend.
In the beginning, we were in the fall in love phase, and therefore naturally we saw each other more. So that was probably around 3 to 4 times a week. And that lasted for about 2 months.
Okay.
Now, as we have been balancing it out, we have been seeing each other only on weekends. So that is 2 days and a half-ish, essentially 2 days for the most part. And the reason for that is because we are kind of like going back to normal life and essentially balancing this new thing that is the relationship with our, day-to-day living and the day-to-day people that we used to meet before. I think first of all, I believe that there is no cookie cutter way that this is the way you're supposed to do
I agree. I don't
things.
think there's a cookie cutter way.
Yeah.
I do think there is sometimes too much though, and too little, I mean, just understanding human nature, right? I mean, to go from seeing someone 5 to 6 times a week, 4 to 5 times a week, and then like wanting to scale it back to normalize it. I mean, to some people that would be off-putting. That would be like oh, we usually see each other 4 to 5 times a week, and now it's only like 2 times a week, you know? But yeah, you know, that was just my quick thought on that. But
I mean, that makes sense. Like, you know, Maddie, she mentions that, you know?
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, I would like to see you more.
See, and I bring that up too, though, because that was how I initially felt with the texting aspect. You remember how I said that?
Yeah.
And I realized, like, at some point you do have to pull back. And you do have to, you know, I read this in the Laws of Human Nature book, but I think Robert Greene said something like, you know, you do have to pull back a little bit and generate curiosity and generate, like, absence, right? To create, I mean, this is just, like, on the concept of desirability. I think, like, if you're too available, then there's not as much to miss.
Yes, true. However, I believe it to be more applicable to the beginning of stages of seeing each other.
Okay.
Rather than necessarily actually being established into a relationship.
Got it.
Because, to be honest, if you need to look at the laws of human nature with your freaking girlfriend or partner, then you might as well shoot yourself. You know?
Yeah.
Because it's your partner. Mm-hmm. I don't want to do a job with my partner. I just want to live.
Yeah.
You know? So, yeah, sure. Do that in the beginning. Maybe don't do it later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In terms of...
like being more absent or just like...
Yeah.
Like pushing and pulling.
Yeah. But I mean, isn't that part of the game, though? That is...
It's definitely a part of the game.
Part of the human game.
Yeah.
I mean, I also do. You gotta admit, like, most girls are not gonna come across like just a grounded guy like you, and just gonna be able to, you know, be direct and be more like calm and slow about things in the way you speak and the way you process things. I feel like
the answer to everything is personal development.
Right.
If you work on yourself, you will have amazing relationships.
Right.
That's literally all all it goes down to.
Yeah, I agree with that. Question off of that. Do you believe in the statement that if you don't have a strong relationship with your parents, that you can't have a strong relationship with, like, your romantic partner?
No.
Okay.
Obviously not.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry if that sounds condescending, but that sounds stupid.
Mind you, I love your answer and glad we have it on record. But no, I mean, I asked obviously from, you know, just things that I brought up to you as well.
Yeah.
And something that has been pushed on, you know, into my thinking and has always been something like, I don't know if that's really true. But again, I think you are a very grounded person. You value relationships. You're very respectful of your family and people around you. So, not that I'm surprised by your answer, but based on your morale and character, you would kind of assume you would say, yes, you need a relationship with your parents in order to have a strong one with your romantic partner.
I mean, that helps. Mm-hmm. You know, if you can have that, amazing. It's definitely going to make your life easier. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean that you cannot develop those skills in and of yourself. Mm-hmm. Just by actually working on yourself.
Yeah.
If you don't have a good relationship with your parents, and also you haven't worked on yourself, good luck. Yeah. It's going to suck. It's really going to suck. Mm-hmm. But if you worked on yourself, you'll be fine. Mm-hmm. So, like, life is never black and white. You know, it's always some sort of shade of gray. Yeah. So there is no, this applies to everything scenario or answer. That's mm-hmm. not how it works. At mm-hmm. least that's what I believe. But what do I know, right?
What are some personal development books you would recommend? And maybe practices that you have done or implemented in your life that you feel has been effective for you in being more grounded and being able to at least attempt to be more objective with situations where you might get too emotionally pulled in and you knew you needed to take a step back, like I have in my last situation I told you, and look at it in a more objective lens. What are some recommendations you have for people that they can do, whether it's reading certain books or implementing or trying certain habits?
First of all, I mean, for anybody interested into social dynamics, read How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie. That's a Bible.
Yeah.
After that, when it comes to thinking objectively about things, obviously it's a process. So get into meditative practices on a daily basis. It doesn't really matter what that is. That may be walking, that may be actually meditating, that may be taking some time to reflect on your day, in the beginning of the day, at the end of the day. And it's important that you do it on a daily basis and not just sporadically, mainly because you want to turn this into an habit. By not turning into an habit, what you're doing is you're essentially telling yourself, my mental clarity is not a priority to me. And because of the fact that it's not a priority, then I will just allow myself to drift off and just be taken aback from all the things that come up on a day-to-day basis. Lastly, the biggest thing that really helped me when it comes to this, and I mentioned that with you, is dopamine detoxing. So that is essentially removing all social media apps from your phone, not watching porn, not watching TV entertainment, no binge eating, no overly sugary foods, no alcohol, no drugs. And that mental clarity that comes from just essentially like removing all these things is freaking amazing. In the sense that for me, it helped when it comes to drive, willpower, clarity, and overall just getting your life back together. I really believe that like 99% of people under the age of 60 right now, and probably 80% of people over the age of 60 are dopamine addicted. And that whatever you say, it doesn't make you in control, you know. Just it's so powerful. It's so insanely powerful.
2 more questions. One being, if you had to give one piece of advice for women in the realm of dating today, what would it be?
Don't stress. It's not worth it. Yeah, I mean, I know this might be underwhelming, but I truly believe that stress is such a big reason why people don't end up going with the partner that they want, just because of the continuous cycle of self-sabotaging thoughts of, you know, am I good enough? What is this person going to think of me? Essentially this constant judgment that you have towards yourself, and this constant feeling of not being enough. Don't stress will be one. I'm going to give you another one, and that is love yourself. And by loving yourself, I don't mean necessarily, oh, that's fine, like, you know, start binge eating or like treat yourself to a dinner. That sounds stupid. That's not what I mean. What I really do mean is put yourself first. Put yourself as a priority. Put your well-being as a priority. That includes physical, mental, spiritual, whatever. And express that love on a daily basis towards everybody that you meet. I went through a very, very profound transformation only a few days ago when I watched a coach called Steve Ardison. It's this guy that charges $200,000 for coaching. And
200,000?
200,000, yeah.
Okay.
For 50 hours of working with him.
Okay.
And I went through a testimonial of this guy that made the video called 100 Hours with Steve Ardison, somebody that worked with him. And the traits that this guy mentioned about Steve Ardison, the coach, were really freaking interesting in the sense of this guy is essentially doesn't do anything apart from loving himself and other people. That is his main priority in life. And the beauty about it is that it kind of elevates him into this freaking loving individual that is like pure love. And so if you look at his calendar, it's like, go show love to the neighbors, and then like go get groceries with love, and then start coaching with love and intensity. And it may sound like such a like corny and like almost crazy thing, like, you know, who's this guy? But if you think about it, it makes sense. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. So I mean, I know I'm kind of like drifting off right now, but it's essentially like love yourself and love other people around of you. And if you make that your priority, your dating and everything else around of you is going to fall into place. Because how could you not find the person that you love if you're loving in and of yourself? That's just impossible. People are so attracted to that.
What you said there too just reminded me what you told me last week that struck a chord in me, which was that because, again, part of that realization was me wanting that control, wanting to hold a funeral, lay a fucker to rest type of thing. And I realized you had mentioned, you know, in order to fall in love, regardless at what point in life, you have to let go. And it made me laugh because I realized like I was constantly trying to not let go and trying to like, again, put myself right back in upper hand control because like I made the decision to like cut something off or something, right? But you said it yourself that you have to feel all of the emotions, and part of that is either pain or love, happiness and love. But in order to ever fall in love, you have to let go of that control. And that definitely hit me because I think I needed to hear that, because I think I feel a sense of control in so much of my life, especially business and work and, you know, my day to day, and I live alone. So I just have a lot of stability for myself in that aspect. And so when a variable like that comes in, it throws me off, and I'm like, I'm not in the driver's seat anymore. And but I'm also really glad that I recognize it, you know. I'm really grateful that I have been able to recognize it and step away, look at it objectively, and clearly not, you know, triggered enough because I can talk about it now, you know, and be like, oh, this is how I was feeling, and clearly I don't feel that way anymore. But that was in part of like some of the things that you have said, my realization of, okay, these are some of the things that I need to work on and need to just reflect on. And yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think the power of loving yourself and putting yourself first was something that I just naturally retracted to. I was like, oh, you know what? Like, let it play out. Like you said, the baby steps thing, and just revert your focus on yourself, right? Like things will ebb and flow. So I definitely took a lot away from our conversation. But I guess last question I have for you, and it's, you know, something I ask everyone on this show. Okay. You can probably guess what it is.
I'm not sure, actually.
What fulfills you in life, Elia?
I think helping other people is probably the ultimate type of fulfillment that I have when it comes to myself. Yeah, I mean, self-actualization really, which for me essentially means helping other people whilst living a happy and good life. Yeah. Yeah.
I like that. And I think that's something we align on very strongly. I think that's what we have connected on, is our love and passion for helping others in our own ways and in a skill set that we have learned, adopted, and have experienced firsthand. And now, you know, being able to share that with others in a helpful manner, I think that's, you know, something that fulfills us both. So, yeah.
Love it.
I love it.
That's one of your superpowers. and your objective side. Yeah, that balance of being kick-ass and like being amazing at all the things that you do, while also being aware of your downsides, is just insane.
Thank you, Elia. Yeah. I appreciate it. I'm glad you came up to me while I was eating gelato.
That was all for today's throwback conversation with one of my very good friends, Elia. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to me if you could share this on your Instagram story, tag the podcast Instagram at What Fulfills You, and my personal one at Emily E. Duong, so I can see who is tuning in, and of course, reshare this with the community. And I do have one small favor to ask. I know that this can feel like kind of a burden because to be fully transparent, I don't always like go rate the podcast that I listen to 24/7 either. But as a podcaster myself, I know how much it means, and it is really valuable just to see you guys rate the show. So if you have been listening for a while, whether you're on Spotify, Apple, Google, whatever platform that is, it really, really, really would just mean so much if you could quickly rate the show, give it 5 stars if you have been loving it, or if you do have some feedback, feel free to send me over DMs. I really do appreciate it, and I love chatting with you guys. But if you have been tuning in for a while, just a quick 5 stars or a review on Apple would truly mean the world to me. And I appreciate you guys just taking the time to tune in every week. And lastly, don't forget about all the What Fulfills You merch. You can check out the card game, the daily gratitude journal, the hats, and all other fun stuff on the website at whatfulfillsyou.com. Since you are a podcast listener, you can get 10% off your purchase with the code WhatFulfillsYou10 at checkout. Again, that's 10% off with the code WhatFulfillsYou10 at whatfulfillsyou.com. Thanks again for tuning in today. I will chat with you all in the next episode.
With one of the best savings rates in America, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. Even easier than choosing Slash to be in your band.
Next up for lead guitar. You're in.
Cool. Yep, even easier than that. And with no fees or minimums on checking and savings accounts, is it even a decision? That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One N.A. member FDIC.
Hi, welcome to your neighborhood pharmacy.
Hi, I've got a prescription for diabetes test strips. How much is the copay?
Well, it depends on your type of commercial insurance and factoring in your yearly spend, subtracting the deductibles, also depending on your monthly allowance.
Why can't there be a better option?
Or you could try Contour Next test strips. A 35 count's only $19.99 over the counter and proven to be highly accurate. Go to contournext.com/radio to see if over-the-counter strips are a more affordable option for you.
I think I'll try Contour Next.